So now you have Torque Pro and real-time charts downloaded from the App Store onto your phone. The first thing to do is to commence with the vehicle setup in Torque Pro. So we open the Torque Pro app. We can see at the top here we have no profile set up for any vehicle. We can also see the phone is trying to connect to the OBD, which is currently not connected, and it's also searching for the GPS. Also on here you can see that real-time charts has already been integrated into the Torque Pro app. So the first thing to do is to set up the vehicle profile. So if we click the icon in the bottom left, we can see here we have settings and vehicle profile. So if you click the vehicle profile, we'll now create a new profile, and we'll give the profile name. So for this one we're going to call it Land Cruiser. We can then choose the vehicle type, and we're going to have an SUV. We know that the engine size is 4.4 litre. We know the vehicle weight, I'll assume it's 2 tons. We then choose the vehicle fuel type, and for this vehicle we'll assume diesel. The fuel capacity, I'm going to assume 120 litres. If you want to add your fuel cost, you can do that here. Then we save. Now we can see at the top right the profile Land Cruiser has been chosen, and we can also recheck that the Land Cruiser is there. Yep. The next thing is to set up the recording settings on Torque Pro. So we go back down to the icon on the bottom left and click Settings. So under General Preferences, the following items are checked. This will probably be automatically set up, so you just have to double check that the settings are the same. I always have auto rotate on, confirm to quit, and default to English. The next thing is to look at the units. We're currently using kilometers, so if you take the box to off, so it's using kilometers, we use Celsius, meters, kilograms, PSI, and Newton meters. And I also use the 24-hour clock by unclicking that off. The next thing to look at is the OBD adapter settings. So the connection type will either be Bluetooth or Wi-Fi depending on your OBD reader that you have. This one is Bluetooth, so we've got Bluetooth Auto on. And then we also allow faster communication by switching that on. We use the fuel level sensor of the vehicle. This is the adapter settings complete now. And next is the data logging and upload. So the most important thing here is the file logging interval. I have this set at 1 second. This gives enough readings to give a credible reading on the fuel levels and consumption rates, and gives us enough data, but not too much data. You can run it at 0.1 second, but you'll have thousands and thousands of fields to try and analyze. So set it for 1 second is probably the most optimal that we found. I also have automatically logged GPS. I have automatic trip recording on. Discard trips less than half a mile. And then I think this is the Torque Pro now set up. The next phase is to go to real-time charts. And now we have to add a file to collect the relevant data that we require. So if you click this icon, you're opening a new recording profile for the PIDs that are to be read. So we will now name this chart, and we'll call this Land Cruiser Test. Now we can set the engine sensors, and we have up to 10 sensors that we can configure. So you have to click the engine configure sensor, number 1, and then you have to choose the sensors that you require. So the first one that we will do is engine load. Click it, and you can see up here we now have engine load. Now this is complete, and then you configure the rest of the sensors in the same fashion by setting the engine sensor, and the next one we will do is engine RPM. So if you just scroll through, here we go, engine RPM is chosen, and then go back, and then you can configure the rest of the sensors. So this is one we set up earlier called Drive Test. We click here. You can delete the chart if you want to. So we called it Drive Test. The engine sensors are all set as per engine load, RPM, fuel flow cc per minute, distance travelled, engine coolant temperature, mass airflow rate, speed, fuel used, and GPS altitude. Now the other thing you have to check for on here is the sampling rate for the chart. This is also set to 1 second, and this matches what we set previously when we were doing the Torque Pro setup. And the important one here is the chart buffer size. So we set this to record for up to 5 hours. Anything above 5 hours, then the old data will be deleted and only the new data collected. So your journey should not really exceed 5 hours. I put the chart window size at 1 minute. These are just your legends and your background colors. So now your vehicle is ready to be connected, and then we can start recording the PIDs and the OBD once we start the drive test. Setup is now complete. So with your OBD now installed in the vehicle, you have to switch on the engine. And now we can open Torque OBD app, and we select the vehicle that we want to use. So for this one we're using the GAC, and now you can see in the top left the Torque app is now flashing and is trying to connect to the OBD. This can take a few minutes while it just finds the OBD. It's now connected, and now the vehicle is flashing, and now it's connected to the ECU, and we can see the profile of GAC. If we look at real-time information, we can see the fuel flow rate. We can also see the RPM. We also have the throttle position, coolant temperature. We can see it's quite low because the vehicle has just started. We'll also be able to do drive testing to measure 0 to 60 acceleration speeds and quarter mile and eighth mile. If we look at the OBD status, we can see that the Bluetooth is enabled and we're connected to the adapter. Now we can open real-time charts. We've already set up our profile for recording, so if we click the top left icon, and we also assume the drive test that we've previously set up. So now we are now recording the live flow of the engine, and from this one we can see that the engine load is recording, engine RPM is recording, fuel flow is reading both readings, the distance has travelled, and we also have the engine coolant temperature. On this vehicle the mass oil flow is not recording, so this PID is not being read, the fuel used, the GPS altitude. Now currently we're running the engine at around about 820 RPM. This is a little bit high, but the engine is cold. If we now apply a load by switching on the AC, we can see the engine load has increased and the engine RPM has remained in the same area, around about 820. Now we'll take the vehicle for a short drive and we'll check that the speed is working. So now we can see as we're driving, RPM is increasing as we accelerate and go faster, and then obviously the speed is being recorded accordingly. Again, as we accelerate, we can see the RPM increasing, and obviously the relevant fuel rate is also showing an increase as more fuel is being pumped in to drive the engine. Additionally, you can also see the engine coolant temperature is increasing as the engine starts to warm up to get to about an optimal of about 80 degrees. depending on the engine type. When we come to a stop, the engine RPM is actually reducing because the engine's warmed up a bit. Once you completed your drive test, you can then now complete the exporting of the relevant files. So you press the pause. Now it's paused the chart recording. Then you can click on the top right, export the data in the CSV file. I'll be sharing this file via WhatsApp. So we just click here, and now the file has been transferred across WhatsApp, and you can download it onto your PC for conversion and analysis in Excel. If we just return here, back to live charts. Now we've sent the CSV file, we can exit. Now we can see the historical files also being saved, and we called this one GAC drive test. So we can see we've driven a half kilometre. And you can go back. And if we go back to Torque Pro app, you can actually see now the engine's warmed up, the RPM has dropped slightly. With the AC on, we're consuming about 1.7 litres an hour. With the AC off, this drops down to 1.3 litres per hour. With the RPM around about 720. Apply the AC back on again. Fuel consumption is back up again to the 1.6, 1.7.